Welcome to this meeting of the United Policyholders WRAP Initiative, Wildfire Risk Reduction Asset Protection Working Group and Info Sharing. We have a special guest today, Mark Brown, who comes to us with a very impressive background. Mark currently serves as Deputy Fire Chief of the Marin County Fire Department, retired. I'm sorry, let me start again. Mark is the retired Deputy Fire Chief of Marin County Fire Department and the current Executive Director of the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority. Chief Brown started his career as a volunteer firefighter in 1986 in Sonoma County. He moved over to the Marin Department in 91 and served there as a firefighter and paramedic until retiring as the deputy chief. He's also worked for search and rescue. He's done all kinds of really important, brave work. After serving for nearly 30 years with the Marin County Fire Department, he retired to become the executive officer for the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority. Now, you heard a little bit about the MWPA from Chief Tyler in the fall, but they are a joint powers agency charged with increasing the safety of Marin's residents through vegetation management projects, evacuation route clearing, evacuation system improvements, public education, and defensible space evaluations. It does seem that the MWPA is, I think, a template for what a lot of other counties are going to need to do, and that they're a joint powers agency and they are actually able, that makes them able to issue grants. I think that's a primary value of setting up that kind of entity. And of course, Chief Brown is very familiar with the strategies of both fire prevention strategies. He was worked on a CAL FIRE incident management team for 15 years. And so has done a lot of post-event analysis of what conditions help and hinder firefighters' ability to save homes and lives. So with no further ado, Chief Brown, thank you for being with us, and we look forward to hearing your presentation.
Well, thank you for having me. And first things first, even when I was in the fire service, the term Chief Brown always kind of bugged me. So please be call me Mark.
Call you Mark.
That's much more comfortable for me.
Okay.
And I'm looking at the participant list and I see quite a few familiar names. So there's definitely going to be some people in the audience that can keep me honest as I go through this. And one thing I want to emphasize, especially seeing some of the people that are in here and knowing what they're doing, in no way, shape, or form are we trying to say the MWPA is doing work that is not getting done elsewhere. We are actually following the examples of proactive communities throughout the state. I think what is unique about us is our governance structure, being a joint powers agreement across multiple jurisdictions and how we're able to collaborate across that. I think that's important to note. Again, we're learning from everybody else as we do this. And with no further ado, I will share my screen and look for a thumbs up from somebody to make sure that I've got it set up properly.
You got it.
All right. So thank you for the introduction. I won't go any further than you already did. Much appreciated. Typical background slide or slide. Hey, this is what we're going to talk about today. So a brief background and history of the MWPA, a little bit about building the MWPA, but then I think we'll focus more on what we're doing and where we're going. And I don't really need to tell this group that the wildfire environment has changed. Therefore, the way we either suppress or prepare for wildfire needs to change. And the fire history in Marin, and what I like to say is the best way to predict the future in wildland fire is to look at the past. And so when we look at the past fire history in Marin, that's very predictive of the future, except I put a caveat on that. And I use the Tubbs fire as my example. In 1964, the Hanley fire burned almost the exact same footprint as the Tubbs fire did in 2017. The difference is in 1964, Took 2.5 days to fill that footprint. In 2017, 6 hours. So not only is it it's a good predictor, but now we have to increase the rate of spread, and then we also have to increase that footprint, because in 64 the Hanley fire did not jump across 101, whereas in 2017 we all know it did. And this one fire that we have here listed in for 1923 is the largest fire in Marin's history. And talking about history repeating itself, that fire happened in 1923. And what a lot of people don't know is the Hanley fire and the Tubbs fire also happened in 1923, that same night, as did a previous Oakland Hills fire that same night. So the best way to predict the future is look at the past. We have 19 different entities in Marin that have taxing and fire authority. And we know that fire has no jurisdictional boundaries, and we need to address these concerns together. In Marin County, we've done a great job of responding to fires regardless of boundaries. However, our wildfire prevention efforts were not so seamless across jurisdictional boundaries. A lot of it has to do with ordinances and local laws or state laws driving the decisions that we go through. So we were kind of bound by our own bureaucracy. So we looked to try to get through that. After the 2017 fires, we invited law enforcement, fire, and land management agencies to Marin, and we asked them a series of questions. What were you doing before the 2017 fires happened? What were you doing during? And what did you learn from all that? What were your successes? What were your challenges? And this allowed us to create this lessons learned packet that had 6 pages of action items. And I mean single typed action items. And when we looked at those action items, it was clear that there was no single agency, no single jurisdiction, no single discipline that was in charge of making sure all those action items occurred. And in government, it's almost just as important. No one was funded for this. And the only way that we were going to be able to get this effort done was to either decrease funding for other parts of government or create a JPA and be able to fund that JPA. We also had support from our Marin Civil Grand Jury. They wrote a report. This is actually about their 3rd report on wildfire preparedness that they had written. And it very much echoed the lessons learned. And so we started down the path of creating our joint powers agreement and found a way to get it funded. And one of the things that we really think is important, though, is changing that paradigm and changing the language that we're using. We're not going to eliminate fire. In fact, the effort to eliminate fire has greatly put us into the position we're in, right? 110 plus years of fire suppression in an environment that's used to having fire, an environment that requires fire to stay healthy. So we're changing the way we're working on it. We're working with the flow. We understand wildfire is necessary. And most important, I think, is we're creating fire adapted communities that are resilient to wildfire. It's also important that we build upon existing relationships. And this is true everywhere. It's not just true in Marin. It's true in every one of our communities. And I think one of the things that's somewhat unique about Marin is that we are a small county. We have small cities. We don't really have any one entity that's really overpowers anybody else. And whether it's in wildfire or whether it's in law enforcement or even public works, most of the cities and towns in the county itself were sometimes too small to handle problems themselves. And so the county of Marin has gotten used to coordinating with each other in order to accomplish our goal in whether it's public safety or regular, just good old government services. We've also are very fortunate to have Fire Safe Marin. We feel it's an extraordinary resource for us to tap into. And so when the MWPA came about, we felt no need to replace their public messaging. In fact, now Fire Safe Marin has turned into our public messaging arm. And then you see our law enforcement and fire standing side by side. This is a fire we had 2 years ago, and they're working together, working through the evacuations that we were doing for that fire. So these are just a small example of the community relationships that we leveraged and other communities need to be able to leverage. We are also working hard to justify and guide all of our work through science. There's a lot of value in experiential data from our firefighters and what the firefighter's eye tells us, but being able to fall back on our 2020 version of our CWPP, or Community Wildfire Protection Plan, that has a high resolution LiDAR data, that we were able to create a parcel level risk assessment. This is helping us prioritize our work. So we're back in our work with science as well as experience. I'll let you guys read the mission statement, but what I think is important is the collaborative effort that we are endeavoring with the MWPA. And I feel one of our roles and responsibilities is to be a convener and is to bring people together. We have a really close relationship with our land managers. Marin has a very high percentage of publicly owned land. And so that's why it's so important to work with our land managers. And then Marin residents, and this is, a direct connection with United policyholders. It's one of the struggles is to convince the homeowner or the residents they have a responsibility in this. It's not just public safety that needs to make them safe from this. And so we've been working hard for the residents to accept that responsibility. We are engaging with civic leaders, whether they're elected, appointed, or leaders at large within our communities. And then obviously first responders are a very close partner for us. And then developing business relationships. And I think we all realize if we're going to be successful in wildfire mitigation, it's going to take a public-private partnership. It can't just be the public agencies. For example, we simply don't have enough personnel to do our vegetation management projects in public employment. We don't have enough people to do evacuation route clearing. So partnering with our private industry is vitally important. And then this speaks to our acknowledgement that we can't eliminate fire, nor should we strive to eliminate fire. What we need to do is create resilient communities that can withstand a major fire while limiting the loss of life and major property damage. And then what's obviously very important is our rich environmental diversity that not just Marin, but every county in the state has. So we were able to, through our strategic plan process, to create 5 goals. And I'm actually going to start at the middle of this slide. And that is our goal to reduce the risk to homes. And I'm starting with that slide because our strategy is what we're calling our house out approach. We're working with our residents to harden their homes, make their homes less ignitable through home hardening and also through fire smart landscaping, creating defensible space around their homes. I often think that we focus on the mega fires too much. Mega fires are still only 1% or so of the fires that we experience in the state of California. I feel that we should be focusing on the 90% plus fires, the fires that happen every day, that 3-acre fire that can get to a home faster than a fire engine can. And if we help our residents harden their homes, help our residents create defensible space, then that home defends itself from that 3-acre fire. And then the strength of our communities is some of its parts. If we have all of our community members doing this, focusing on the 90% fires, then we become safer for the 1% fire. We've also are working on improving our evacuation systems, whether it's our notification systems, detection, our cameras. Another example is the Zone Haven picture that you see here. MWPA funds the Zone Haven subscription so we can help keep our residents informed during evacuations. And then one of our biggest aspects is reducing wildfire fuels, whether it's the vegetation management along our evacuation routes, working within the wildland urban interface boundary, or larger forest health landscape level projects. And then public education is vitally important. That's part of the way that we get the residents to accept their responsibility around their homes, but also to be prepared for evacuation. I would say prior to 2017, actually up to 2020, there was still a sentiment within Marin County, since we don't have the same type of fire history that other counties do. I think there was a sentiment that, well, it's not going to happen here. It happens to other counties. We are finally turning that tide where our residents acknowledge it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And we're doing that through our public education. And then we also provide homeowners with grants. And then we also have low income seniors tax exemptions. We really are a ground up organization, 17 members, which means we have a 17-member board of directors, which is always fun for the executive officer. So that's why we have an executive committee where I can work more closely with the executive committee. But down at the bottom, our advisory technical committee and operations committee each consist of one person from our member agencies. Our operations committee is populated by fire chiefs and city managers. They create the strategy for our annual work plan. Then we pass that strategy along to advisory technical committee, which I call them our pre-fire engineers, stealing a term from Cal Fire. And they are our subject matter experts. They're the ones who build the projects that are in alignment with that strategy. Then the MWPA staff works with our member agencies to bundle that into a cohesive work plan. Operations committee makes the recommendation to our board of directors to approve it, and then we move forward with our work. Our funding is broken up into 3 categories. 60% of our funding is what we call our core budget. And so that's for veg management, grants, public education, and our evacuation system improvements. 20% goes to defensible space evaluations and home hardening. So that is either a pass-through to our member agencies for them to execute those inspections or for the MWPA to execute those inspections. Our tax is a 10-year tax at 10 cents per square foot, so about 20 million a year. We need to renew it after 10 years, but I think at 10 years, when we look back, we will say our single largest success was our defensible space and home evaluation program. And then we have a pass-through of 20% to our member agencies because our fire agencies have such a close relationship with their communities. They're really the ones that know what is best for their communities and what projects they should be working on. So they receive a portion of that funding based on their population. And then they have to show that this work is above and beyond what they were doing before the passage of Measure C. So we wanted this measure to amplify the work, not replace work that was already being done. So what is the work that we're doing? So here's a little peek at our 22-23 work plan. Again, emphasizing on the house out approach. I mentioned it over and over, but can't say it enough. Home hardening, defensible space, and then the parcel. This is a screenshot of our parcel level data and our parcel level risk assessment in our CWPP that is helping to guide where we do our inspections, where we do our work. But we're also working on a system to update that data based on our evaluations and the actions taken by our residents so that we could show that we are creating risk reduction within our communities. Here's a picture of some of our inspectors going out and meeting with a resident. We have probably 75 to 80,000 residential parcels in Marin. And 2 years in a row, we've been just shy of 34,000 inspections a year. And 70 to 80% of those inspections are full 360 inspections. That remaining 20 to 30 is just from the front of the street. And what we've found is that 60% of the residents who received an inspection is taking some form of action. We want to raise that number.
Sorry, I normally never interrupt a presenter. I just have a very small question on this. How many inspectors do you have on your squad to do these 34,000?
Between our agencies, about 54.
Okay, thanks. Sorry for the interruption.
No worries. So we also have a comprehensive resident grant program, and we've linked it directly to our defensible space evaluations. When they receive their report, they actually get a link where they can click on that link. All the information, their address, the findings of the evaluation automatically transferred over to our grant program. It'll show them what they're eligible to apply for. We have a $1,000 limit for defensible space and a $5,000 limit for our home hardening. 303 grants were awarded for the first half of this fiscal year, close to 406 or a little over actually $460,000. What we're seeing though is that most residents are spending twice as much, if not more, for that work than what we are funding with grants. So we feel that this is creating even that much more work. And what we haven't captured yet, we're looking at a way to capture this is, of all the people who haven't applied for grants, how much money are they putting in? So we actually are creating a large investment in community resiliency through our inspection program. some of the things we want to do in the future is a direct connection to contractors, so that if they receive their report with the resident's permission, that report can be sent to various contractors and they can give a quote on how much the work is going to take, whether it's home hardening or defensible space work. And in regard to home hardening, there's a couple items we think are so important, vents and gutters, that we're going to put out an RFP that we'll have a contractor that will have a warehouse of 100,000 or more vents. And if you have a recommendation for vents, you can connect directly with the contractor will come in, do the work, and then we can fund that contractor directly. A weakness that we have in our grant program is that it's a reimbursement program. So those without the financial resources may have difficulty accessing it. A lot of people don't have $6,000 to spend on home hardening and defensible space. So for those that meet the direct assistance requirements, we want to be able to fund that work directly without the resident having to pay for it first. And then we are partnering on a beta test with Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety and Wildfire Prepared Homes. One of the things that we wanted to avoid was we wanted to streamline the process for our residents. By the time our residents meet the Wildfire Prepared Home designation, they've probably had 3 inspections from our member agencies. And we didn't want our residents to have to pay another $125 and have another inspection. So we are in partnership with IBHS now. We've sent them our first 4 homes through our data connection. So what can happen is that with the residents' permission, that data can be transmitted to IBHS and they can apply for the Wildfire Prepared Home designation and receive it without a IBHS inspector coming. And I don't know what you guys feel, but I feel that the insurance companies for California are going to lean on this program rather than create their own inspection programs to meet the safer from wildfire regulations for California. I could be wrong, but that's kind of where I think it's going. And then our chipper days, another direct connection with our inspection program. After you receive your inspection and we make recommendations for what vegetation you should be trimming back, removing, you can sign up for chipper days. And it's rather than a single appointment, we target entire communities for a week. And so you can sign up, you can see what week your community's at, you pile the material up front, chipper truck comes by. On average, a resident is paying $200 a year for the MWPA tax. And I think this type of chipper day is a direct return on investment for our residents, because it would cost far more than $200 for them to have that same type of service. 1,051 dump trucks worth of material was hauled away. And right now what we're doing is analyzing the biomass that's being removed through chipper days and also through all of our vegetation management projects. And we're looking at how we can utilize that biomass, whether it's for power, whether it's for furniture for larger dimension, mulch, so on and so forth. So we're looking forward to that assessment. Public education, we spend close to $1 million a year now on public education. Bottom left corner is my favorite form of public education. It's right back to defensible space evaluations. That's where we connect with our residents one-on-one. We had a phenomenal event called Ember Stomp, where we invited all of our public agencies and also contractors who are doing a lot of this work. And we anticipated 700, 800 people to attend. We had 2,000 attend. And the public education that was provided through that was awesome. So we're actually ramping this up for next year. We're hoping to increase the attendance. Evacuation route clearing. I think we all know that traffic jams are inevitable in an evacuation. None of our roads were designed for the entire community to leave at once. So we need to make it safe for our people to be on their roads, in their cars. And here's just before and after. Zone Haven, I mentioned already. And here's something I do think is novel, is we are doing an ingress-egress evacuation risk assessment. We are looking at every roadway within our jurisdiction, and we're not just looking at the fire threat. We're looking at the fire threat, we're looking at demographics, we're looking at the roadway, what type of traffic infrastructure, how many cars can that road handle? What type of traffic devices are there? Are there stoplights or stop signs? Can we align the preemption devices to make all the lights green? Analyze where we need to do traffic control. Maybe we need to change our parking formations, or maybe not allow on-street parking during red flag days. Just received a preliminary report on that assessment we had high expectations for it and is already exceeding our expectations. So this is going to help inform our work and focus our efforts exactly where we should be focusing our efforts. Obviously, we prescribe herbivory or goat grazing I never knew the word herbivory before I came to work for the MWPA, I'll be honest. Goat grazing, sheep grazing, and cattle grazing, actually, what we're finding is that it's a combination that really needs to happen between different animals and to use them at the right place at the right time. And then we are doing a large network of shaded fuel breaks. And some people ask, what exactly is the shaded fuel break? And may not be the best description of what we're doing, just because not all the areas had shade to begin with. But areas that did have shade, we want to keep that shade because it helps keep the fuels below the trees cooler. It helps keep moisture in the ground. Our goal, though, is to remove ladder fuels, and our work is within 100 to 300 feet of our homes. One thing we have is we do have a very defined wildland urban interface boundary. So this allows us to have these continuous fuel break networks that are within 100 to 300 feet of our homes. And if you look at this one picture on the top right, you see that an ember that lands in those bushes can easily create enough energy to get up into the canopy. That canopy creates much more energy, many more embers that get thrown into the homes. Whereas that picture on the bottom right is if an ember lands in that, it's likely just to smolder. And it's not going to create a new high intensity spot fire closer to our homes. So what does success look like? Do we expect these fuel breaks to stop fires? No. We expect these fuel breaks to change the wildfire environment. We expect them to decrease the rate of spread, decrease the fire line intensity, and most importantly, in the defensible space realm, decrease the number of embers that are being thrown up against our homes. Here is an example of the Greater Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Break, 38 miles. And this is just kind of a description and the environmental process that we went through for project-specific analysis through the California Vegetation Treatment Plan. And here is our Novato Shaded Fuel Break network, which is about 60 miles of shaded fuel breaks. And an example of the wildfire prediction and modeling that we did to prioritize where we can do our work, because no way can we do 60 miles in 1 year. So we have to be able to focus our efforts where we think the greatest risk is. And then the last piece is being a regional joint powers agreement that creates some synergies that people who provide grants like to see. And so we have been successful in getting some grants because of that relationship we have within our member agencies. And we're turning that around and creating more work to get that gets done on top of the 20 million a year that we have. And we're also wanting to serve as a pass-through, for lack of a better word, that if we can receive home hardening, direct assistance grants as a government entity, we can turn around and push that right back to our residents. And my ultimate goal, whether it's realistic or not, is for every dollar the resident puts into the MWPA, we find another dollar to match it through grant programs. And I think that was my last slide. So I'll stop the screen share after talking nonstop for a while and take questions.
All right. I'm sure there are quite a few. So if you have a question, you can use the raised hand feature or you can put it in the chat. First of all, thank you, Mark. Very, very impressive, very interesting. If you wouldn't mind, I have a couple quick questions before we turn to the group. So you mentioned your instinct is that insurance companies are going to follow the IBHS wildfire prepared home checklist. I've had the exact same instinct, and that's fine. But we've also been hearing that the strict enforcement of a 5 feet with absolutely no plants whatsoever is such an impediment that many communities aren't even kind of going there in terms of trying to promote it, because they feel like it was a non-starter, and then you've got the shaded fuel break concept, recognizing that a certain amount of shade is good. So I know it's a little delicate. We have a lot of respect and appreciation for what IBHS has done. And do you feel like it's incumbent on firefighting professionals to kind of talk this through with them and try to help them maybe take a slightly more flexible approach?
I completely agree. We do feel that the requirements for a wildfire prepared home, especially the highest level, may be unachievable, especially in the built environment, which would require remodel type ordinances to get people to do a lot of the work. The zone 0 is definitely a challenge. No wooden doors is a challenge, and they excuse me. We look at our beta test with IBHS as an opportunity for us to help shape their requirements and perhaps negotiate some different requirements. And I can, I'll use shade as an example, like you brought up, Amy. One of the things they wanted within 30 feet of the home was 12 feet of canopy separation. In a coniferous forest, that might be a good idea, but in the grassy oak woodlands of much of Marin County, we don't want that. We actually want that shade. We want that canopy. And with oak trees, it's different than with conifer trees or other trees. So yeah, we feel that the beta test is going to be an opportunity for us to help shape it.
Yeah. Okay. We have a question from Annie Barber, who's on United Policyholders staff after having lost her home in the Tubbs fire. Annie is asking, do the residents have to ask for an inspection, or are you inspecting all homes on a sort of mapping basis?
That's a fantastic question. And one thing I don't like about our name is it ends with authority. And what I say tongue in cheek, but it's actually 100% true. The MWPA has absolutely positively no authority whatsoever. All the authority lies with our member agencies. That includes inspections. So we support and guide the inspection program, and it's up to our member agencies to decide how they implement it. One of our member agencies does use an appointment process. Actually, 2 of our member agencies use an appointment process. The rest of our agencies, we pick a community, we flood that community with inspectors. We knock on doors. If we're allowed to do the 360, we do the 360. If we aren't allowed, then we call it the UPS test. If the UPS driver can get to that point, that's where we can inspect. And then we provide a door hanger. And then we invite the resident to call us back if they weren't home to let us do the rest of that inspection. And we find that quite often they do. We have tremendous data that we're developing, and that may change. I think the right way to do is to flood the neighborhoods. Our member agencies that aren't doing it that way, after they see the data, may decide to go that same way.
Okay. Dawn Bullard asks, who is the consultant who's performing your evacuation ingress egress risk assessment?
Another great question. That was a question that we were asking ourselves when we put out our request for proposals, because we felt it was so comprehensive that it wasn't going to be possible for one entity to do it. So the team that's doing it is led by Sonoma Technology Incorporated. They have Fear and Peers doing the traffic modeling, Fear, FEHR and Peers. They did a similar project in Rancho Cucamonga. Then we have Spatial Informatics doing our wildfire modeling. We have UC Berkeley analyzing our communications network and building in the human behavior aspect to it. And then a non-paid component of that project is Zone Haven. And what they've promised is the data that we get from our project will help inform Zone Haven.
Okay. Okay. We have a question from another UP team member, Joel Loucher, who was worked at the Department of Insurance for many, many years, and has been a huge help on this project. Joel.
Thank you, Amy, and thank you, Mark, for this presentation. Really helpful. I was wondering if you have a listing of kind of the detailed practical tips, for example, where people can get some of these products and product recommendations for things like vents. One of our participants today is, I think, a vendor of that, but also the gates maybe they can implement into their fencing in those last 5 feet. And one of the standards in many of the lists for mitigation is 6 inches from ground up of non-combustible area. And of course, a lot of homes have siding that reach down below that. Maybe there's a flashing or some product that can just push right into there. And the prices for some of these products, price ranges for the contractors for doing some of the work. So some of the details of the recommendations.
And so being a public entity, we've done our best to avoid to make vendor recommendations or product recommendations. But that's where our partnership with Fire Safe Marin comes in handy. We help share that type of information through Fire Safe Marin. We're looking to work with them to improve it. It's not as full and comprehensive as we like, but a model that we'll follow is one that they started, and that was years ago before the MWPA even existed. They provided landscaper training. And so then people who have gone through that landscaping training are listed as vendors on the Fire Safe Marin list. But we also have contractors that do home hardening listed. We have whether it's the different brands, events, they're all listed within the Fire Safe Marin website.
Great. And Dennis O'Neill very helpfully posted in the chat a link to We Listed Products, a handbook. So that should answer somewhat as well. Okay, we have another question from Chris. Chris, I've got a mental block. Xiao, who's a very similar credentials to you, former firefighter, has done lots of post-event evaluations, and Chris is asking, to what extent are you working with PG&E to mitigate ignition and conduct fuel reduction on power line rights of way?
And that was something we thought about as we were building the MWPA. And if you remember back to the one slide that had our organizational chart that has an advisory technical committee, we built in language for non-member agencies to be a non-voting ad hoc member of that committee. And so we actually have 2 of the vegetation management specialists for PG&E embedded into that committee as non-voting members, so that we can try to bring alignment with our projects and the work that they're doing for power line clearing. Definitely room to improve. I won't say it's perfect right now, but we're getting there. And we do have a current project out in West Marin, evacuation route clearing project, that is going on simultaneously with a PG&E project. So we're learning through our experience.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Sandy Wetzel Smith down in San Diego, also like Annie, fire survivor, learned the hard way a lot of these things. She says, I'm very impressed with your plan. I've wondered lately, as more and more people acquire electric and plug-in cars, I got that, how we provide an adequate infrastructure to support plug-in battery requirements as electric power is reduced and batteries go low over time. Has that come your way?
It doesn't come our way all that much, but it definitely is a concern. But also, I think where it intersects with us is public education, and to help those that are totally EV, to know that, especially with public safety power shutdowns, that there's a balance in the power that you have in your batteries, your cars, and having your cars power your house, making sure that you don't draw down your car so much that you can't evacuate. So it's not, again, we don't have authority, so we can't make any ordinances or laws, but what we can do is help work with our policymakers, our elected officials, to be consistent across the jurisdiction, because that's one of the things that's frustrating, is that there's different rules as you cross city boundaries. And then we can also help inform that decision making as they make rules about how many EVs they're going to have, what infrastructure is going to support the EVs. But I think the biggest part about it is have enough battery and then some to evacuate.
Yeah. Well, this is just all so many interesting topics here. Before we even launched this project, because we've worked with so many in so many communities that have been hit by wildfires and brought our roadmap to recovery program to those communities, we stay, we get heart connected to these communities, and we try to then do preparedness work and kind of, while we have people's attention on things around insurance, we do a lot of that. And so we had hooked up years ago or connected with Brandguard Vents, a vent manufacturer, ember screen vents, because it always struck us as, well, this is so inexpensive. This is the kind of thing that almost anybody should be able to afford, right? They're not cost prohibitive, have generally, is at least that was our impression. And now it feels like, screening vents is something, you hear Roy Wright, the head of IBHS, he always talks about that, how much their experiments at their facility has shown how embers are so much more of a factor, So I guess I have a question, because Brandguard Vents, run by a married couple, one of whom was a firefighter or still is, and they've been on these calls, and actually Kelly is on. So Kelly was asking, can you speak more about the RFP? I'll make sure you guys get connected. But Kelly, did you have any other questions for Mark about the vent program, other than how you might apply?
I think just getting more information about it. I mean, just seeing thank you, by the way, super informative for me, everything on your presentation. But I think, it's just exciting to see the progression from when we entered the industry in 2008, to see the knowledge and the focus put on home hardening in general, and also in vents. It's just really great progress in the industry. So thank you. You guys are doing a lot of work, a lot of great work.
And thank you. And I don't take this as dancing around your question. We're still designing what that RFP is going to look like. So I don't exactly know what it's going to look like. I think it's going to be more pointed at a contractor that is licensed to install them. And then part of the proposal would be what types of vents they're going to use and what the price point is.
Yeah. Okay, great. Question from Patricia Cisla from Santa Cruz County. Now that MWPA has been around for a few years, can you share any thoughts on your initial formation and framework? Maybe lessons learned about how, I guess, how effective or problematic various elements are. Should we copy you in our county? So, that was kind of, I was sort of hoping that was going to be the outcome of your presentation, was that some other areas would think, yeah, we should set up a JPA. I mean, I know that when the California Earthquake Authority wanted to start sort of beefing up their brace and bolt grant program that they administer, they had to form a JPA. So yeah, in terms of like forming your JPA, I mean, were there things now in hindsight you wished you had done differently, or do you think your method, your whole structure is the right one? And I will just note that your colleague Chief Tyler left me with a very strong feeling that the approach that you took to working with environmental groups has been one of the kind of cornerstones of your success.
And Chief Tyler was one of the instrumental figures from the very beginning in the development of this. And Novato Fire is a model that we can all follow. I think we have the right answer for Marin. Whether or not this is the exact right answer for every county, I don't know. However, take the best pieces that you like from ours and apply it. Some areas don't want another JPA. They see it as a bloated bureaucracy, but we did build language into it so that we can't be a bloated bureaucracy. There's actually limits to our administrative costs. Where I think we hit the right sweet spot is our decision making, and that is We were worried about the larger agencies being able to over influence our decisions. But we're also worried about the small agencies that don't have that much jurisdiction being able to guide. So we wanted to find that sweet spot. And what I think how we did it is working really well for us, is that when we go for a vote on a board of directors, it has to be 50% plus one of the board of directors that are in attendance. But it also has to be 50% plus one of the population that they are representing in that meeting. So you don't get to where the big boys can drown out the smaller agencies and vice versa. I think that's where one thing that we did really, really well. Another place where we can improve is that in an effort to be ultimately and extremely transparent, we made our advisory technical committee, who's our subject matter experts, their staff, we made them a Brown Act compliant committee. And that's actually decreasing our transparency. So that is a change that we may make. And then to follow up on what Chief Tyler said about our partnership with our environmental groups, before the MWPA was formed, but with the idea that MWPA was coming, we created a group called the Ecologically Sound Practices Partnership. It's all of our environmental stakeholders. It's all of the fire agencies coming together. The fire agencies provide the fire expertise. The environmental stakeholders provide the environmental expertise. We meet with those folks twice a month. Every one of our projects is vetted with them. We have Panorama Environmental as our environmental consultants. So as we prepare, whether it's a notice of exemption, mitigated neg deck, or project-specific analysis, we're sitting side by side with those folks. And there are no surprises when we go to our community meetings.
Yeah. So we have another excellent question from Susan Frommer, which before I ask it, I'm going to give a little bit of I'm going to annotate. I recently did a presentation to legislators from around the country at a conference, and I shared a screenshot. I shared a couple screenshots with them. So everyone wants to know, how is California's wildfire insurance market, is it doing with regard to the availability and affordability problems that have become known nationally, right? And how are we, the two slides I shared with the lawmakers. One was from your deck that shows the amount of money that homeowners are putting up to on their own to kind of match what they're getting in grants, which I think is a very impressive data point. And then also about the Wildfire Partners program in Boulder, which up until a lot of the developments of the last 4 years, they were the only program that we knew about that in the country that was involved in facilitating wildfire risk reduction, and then interfacing, another step, interfacing with insurance companies on people's behalf to try to get them a break for the work that they had done. And that's Susan's question is, with all the work done, are residents seeing some benefits coming back in terms of reduced cost for fire insurance? That's her question.
So first, a big shout out to Wildfire Partners in Colorado. Believe me, we are trying to get everything out of that program as we can. I've been in contact with them and say, hey, we want to beg, borrow, and steal from you guys. One of our benefits is that we're funded for the defensible space evaluations, and that was one of the hurdles that they were able to get over. But partnering with the insurance companies was something that we are following their model. I will say that we've helped people maintain their insurance through our efforts at this point. I'm not sure if we've helped any communities decrease or any residents decrease their costs, perhaps through Firewise communities we have, but we don't have that data yet, but I do know that we've helped with renewals.
Yeah, and that's the slide that I shared from Wildfire Partners spoke directly to that point. It said, we don't, the insurers that are to say they're participating is maybe a bit of a stretch, but they supporting, endorsing in some ways, all of our partners. They're not promising discounts, so they're not necessarily making, which of course people want. We want people to have both, but they are, but they have not. They don't know of anybody who's gone through their program that then got dropped by their insurer. So those are, those two rewards, right? Getting to keep your insurance and being able to afford, or getting a break on your insurance. We want both. That's what we're aiming for in the regulations and the here. But we know that good news came from Jim Webster, and that the insurers are working, and it gives me hope. I think there's a lot of problems with the California market that are not completely related to our mega fires in the last 6 years. There's a lot of sort of global problems, reinsurance pricing, that are contributing to what's happened in California. But for sure, we're, insurers are still not giving people the kind of breaks, at least across the board, that we want to see them to get. But I feel like we're going to get there. So Mark, have you sort of identified a few insurers that that you can dialogue with, or you like interfacing with the Janet Ruiz, like the sort of trade association?
So we actually are in direct contact with a couple insurers. I actually have a non-disclosure agreement, so I have to be a
That's
little bit
fine.
but we are engaging with some of the larger, I'll just say the larger insurance companies, the ones that actually want to stay in California.
Yep. Well, that's great. I've always felt like, USAA kind of, they started things on a good note with the 5% discount, which, and then we thought, what we want to see, of course, is, insurers compete for who offers the best break for somebody who's, who's done home hardening in defensible space. But you got to start somewhere. And I think, working with one or two is the way to go. And I think that's what Wildfire Partners did. They worked with just a couple of carriers. All right. I don't see any more unanswered questions in the queue. I don't see any more hands raised. So I think we're just going to say a really big thank you to you, Mark, for answering questions and doing the work that you're doing. Really, I echo what Chris just put in the chat. Great presentation, Chief, and Mark. And thank you. So, just a couple housekeeping matters for the group. Coming up next month, our guests will be Chris and Samantha Orient, who are a team that UP has contracted with to build out our RAP Resource Center. I'm really looking forward to their presentation. And then I think there's just a soft ask. And thank you, Emily. That meeting is going to be February 7th, same time, same bat channel, 1 o'clock PDT. The soft ask is where we want to have a couple speakers to kind of shed some light on the categories of professionals that are available for you to hire to do the work that is being prescribed on the Safer from Wildfires framework, and also the IBHS program, and then start to sort of get data on some of the cost ranges of what you can expect to pay somebody for the work, and which things people are DIY for more and more people, whatever. So we're thinking about doing a survey of this group, I think. And so if you are with a group that has kind of gone pretty far down the road, vetting contractors, professionals to do the work, box the eaves, create the 6 inches clear space, et cetera, if you wouldn't mind shooting Emily an email, emily@uphelp.org, just letting her know that you're a resource that we can tap, because we're just looking to help people not reinvent the wheel. So that's why, we have Mark here talking about what they've now accomplished. And again, the hope is that that will make it easier for some of you in other areas to benefit from the success of the development of the MWPA in your area. So with that, I think everything else in the chat is just saying thank you to you, Mark, except for Jim Brashear's sharing. We're looking at starting a taxing authority for the purposes in the Paradise and adjoining area. I would appreciate connecting with Mark. So I can, Jim, I'll do an introduction for you there, and then as well as for you, Kelly. So with that, I want to hope everybody stays dry and safe, and we so look forward to seeing you again on February 7th here with the United Policyholders crew. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, folks.
Thanks for the work you're doing. Okay, that's